Chapter 272, The Last Hope of Humanity, 2. Sitting down beside Mo, Zhao Lijai asked, "Brother Mo, who is that? What's wrong with him?" "Sister-in-law, that's our new member, Mo Junji. He has a strange illness. I don't know how to explain it, but according to Sister Jiang, his body is corroded from the inside," Mo replied. The moment Zhao Lijai heard the name, her eyes widened in shock. Seeing her reaction, Mo asked, "Little sister-in-law, do you know him too?" Fian said he is a genius in research. Zhao Lijai took several deep breaths to calm her excitement before replying, "I have heard of him before." Rubbing his chin, Mo remarked, "Seems like this brat really is famous." Hearing his words, Zhao Lijai couldn't help but think that this sickly-looking man wasn't just famous before the apocalypse, he became even more renowned afterward. Before her death, she had heard that he had discovered a potion capable of helping ordinary people awaken abilities. Although the success rate was only 0.7%, there were no reports of anyone dying from taking the potion. That alone proved how talented Mo Junji was. Every medicine had side effects, but his potion had none. Either you awakened or you didn't, there was no harm in trying, and the awakening process itself was identical to a natural one. When the potion was released, everyone knew about Mo Junji, the beacon of hope in the apocalypse. He was even given the title, The Last Hope of Humanity. Unfortunately, she died before he could develop a vaccine or cure for the zombie virus, so she never found out what became of him afterward. She had always assumed he was an elderly man in his 80s, especially given the constant news of his poor health, but to discover that he was a man in his 20s, that was the most shocking revelation of all. 5 minutes later, Jiang Lixin let go of Mo Junji's wrist and let out a long sigh. Wiping the sweat from her forehead, she said, "Junji, your condition is very strange. Do you feel anything besides the pain?" Mo Junji took out a handkerchief and gave a soft cough before replying, "No, I only feel a constant burning pain inside my body." Hearing this, Chen Ji frowned in confusion and said, "That's impossible. If your meridians and internal organs are being corroded, logically speaking, you should have collapsed long ago. How can you still be alive?" "Husband, your words are too direct," Jiang Lixin reminded him. Realizing his bluntness, Chen Ji quickly added, "Junji, I didn't mean to be rude. I'm just baffled by your condition." Mo Junji smiled good-naturedly and replied, "It's okay, Brother Chen, I'm used to it." Sitting across from them, Zhao Lijai took out a bottle of water from her space and asked, "Brother Mo, would you like some water?" Mo Junji glanced at the glass of water already on the table, then at the bottle in her hand. He wondered why she offered him more water when he already had some. Though unsure of her intent, he still accepted the bottle politely and said, "Thank you, sister-in-law." Zhao Lijai nodded and fixed her gaze on him. Under her steady gaze, Mo Junji eventually unscrewed the cap and took a sip. The moment the water slid down his throat, his eyes lit up. Even after Jiang Lixin had healed his internal injuries, the pain had remained. It has been several months since he felt the pain, and he had become used to it. The healing eased his coughing, but it was never able to lessen the burning pain he was enduring. But now, after just one sip of this water, the pain in his throat had noticeably subsided. Stunned by this, he quickly gulped down the rest. When he emptied the bottle, Zhao Lijai handed him another without a word. This time he didn't hesitate and drank it all. Surprisingly, the water didn't leave him feeling bloated. Instead, it brought a rare sense of comfort, the feeling he had long forgotten. Closing his eyes, he examined the dark mist lingering inside his body and found it had finally gathered in one place, his brain. The internal injuries he suffered were caused by this very mist. But now, with it being absorbed into his crystal core, his body no longer had to endure the torment of his own ability. Opening his eyes again, he looked at Zhao Lijai with newfound gratitude. Still unwilling to reveal the truth about his ability, he simply said, "Sister-in-law, what kind of water did you give me? After drinking it, the burning pain is gone." Zhao Lijai's eyes flickered for a brief moment before returning to normal. She smiled and replied casually, "It's water I created. If you like it, I can give you more." "Then I won't be polite with you, sister-in-law," Mo Junji said with a smile. While the others simply marveled at how powerful her water-type ability must be, as it is capable of healing pain, only Zhao Lijai knew the truth. The water she gave him came from her pond inside her space. In her previous life, she had heard that Mo Junji frequently fell ill because of his own ability, Poison Mist. Although it was one of the most powerful abilities in the apocalypse, it came with a heavy price. It didn't just destroy enemies during battle, it slowly corroded Mo Junji's own body from the inside out. At first, she wasn't sure if her pond water would help him, as his condition originated from his ability itself. Unless he removed his ability completely, the pain would continue for as long as he lived. Now, it seemed her pond water truly could help. Even if it only reduced his suffering, it was still worth it. For the sake of humanity's survival, Mo Junji has to continue to live for a long time. After the healing session, breakfast was ready. Since they were going to clear out a zombie horde today, the meal was heavier than usual. Chapter 273, A Test 1. In addition to steamed rice, there were also grilled fish, egg drop soup, stir-fried pickled vegetables with pork slices, and mapo tofu. Though the variety of dishes was limited, the portions were generous. "Everyone, it's time to eat," Yu Feian called from the dining room. Upon hearing this, everyone gathered at the table. Seeing the spread of food, Qin Luzi raised his eyebrows and asked, "Who did the cooking?" "Brother Luzi, it was Feian. He is really skilled, almost as good as you," Zyro Kai replied with admiration. He was someone who could manage to blow up a pot when he was boiling water, so anyone who could cook was a god in his eyes. Nodding at his words, Qin Luzi said, "It's good to have another cook. This way the captain and I can finally take a break." Just after he finished his words, Yu Feian walked out of the kitchen, carrying a jar of milk. Hearing his words, he said, "Brother Luzi, you can leave the cooking to me from now on. I learned from my grandma when I was young. As long as we have the ingredients, I can whip up anything you like." "Okay," Qin Luzi agreed instantly. After breakfast, the Phantom team gathered in the living room. Looking at the members, Jin Zuyan said, "Yesterday, we scouted the situation at the border and eliminated 2 smaller zombie hordes. The last zombie horde is located 15 kilometers from the border, and the number of zombies in that area might be more than 200,000. Old Qin and Old Zhang, the 2 of you will come with me to the meeting. The rest of you, prepare your weapons and rest well. We will leave the camp at noon." Hearing this, everyone nodded and replied in unison, "Understood." Jin Zuyan glanced at the new member and said, "Mo Junji, you will stay in the camp with Sister Jiang and Brother Bohai." When he heard this, Mo Junji nodded and said nothing. After drinking the water given by Zhao Lijai, the pain didn't return and he no longer coughed. But to avoid their suspicions, he still covered his lips with his handkerchief and let out some coughs. Noticing this, Zhao Lijai took out several bottles of her pond water from her space and handed them to him while saying, "Brother, you have to drink more water when you cough." Mo Junji accepted the water with a smile and said, "Thank you." "Captain, there is something I need to report," Zhang Yuan said. Jin Zuyan nodded and gestured for him to talk. "Gu Shao's came to find us yesterday, and he wanted to join our team. Besides him and his girlfriend, they also have 9 children with them." The moment he heard this, Jin Zuyan raised his eyebrows. In the previous life, most children died at the beginning of the apocalypse due to their weak physiques and young age. Besides the elderly, the children were the most vulnerable group in the apocalypse. People had limited supplies and energy, and the children's value was very low, so most of them were sacrificed and abandoned. It was not until the 3rd year of the apocalypse that people realized the value of children. With the drop in birth rate, children became valuable assets for the human race. Not only that, but the probability for children to awaken their abilities was 30% higher than for adults. Due to their young age and naive personalities, it was easier to train them as soldiers, and they were loyal to their leaders. Unfortunately, when people realized this, the number of children had already dropped below 5% of the total population. Recalling this matter, Jin Zuyan said, "Did he state his requirement?" Zhang Yuan nodded and said, "He said that he was looking for his girlfriend's family, so he and his girlfriend will mostly leave on their own." Hearing this, Shen Jinj said, "Isn't that equal to asking us to babysit the children for him? He really knows how to dream." Although his words were harsh, they weren't far from the truth, so everyone nodded, agreeing with him. Before Jin Zuyan made his decision, they heard a knock. Zyro Kai went to open the door and returned with Gu Shao's, followed by his team. When they stood in the living room, Qin Luzi suddenly stood up and walked to Feng Yun. Under everyone's confused gaze, he reached out and grabbed something. The next moment they heard a boy shouting, "Let me go." Without saying a word, Qin Luzi threw the invisible person to the ground. Following the sound of something crashing into the table, a boy appeared out of nowhere. Standing a few steps from the boy, he looked at Gu Shao's and said, "Comrade Gu, you said that you want to join the Phantom team. Is this how you show your sincerity? By letting this boy sneak around like a rat?" Seeing Zheng Changchou groaning in pain on the ground, the children quickly rushed over to help him up. Gu Shao's and Rong Mo were surprised by the situation. After the children joined their team, no one had ever noticed Zheng Changchou when he went invisible. This was the first time someone could detect his location and even catch him. It took him a while to regain his composure, and he said, "Comrade Qin, your words are too heavy. Changchou is training his ability, and we have no bad intentions at all." With his hands in his pockets, Qin Luzi said calmly, "2 adults, both ability users. 9 children, 6 are ability users, 3 are ordinary people." After he said this, he pointed at Zheng Changchou and Fu Lijian as he added, "Both of them have mutated abilities." This time, Gu Shao's smile disappeared from his face, and he narrowed his eyes. He looked at Qin Luzi and asked, "How do you know?" Instead of answering his question, Qin Luzi walked to the couch and sat down. He closed his eyes, ignoring him. Chapter 274, A Test, 2. Noticing the tense situation, Zhang Yuan looked at his captain and asked, "Captain, what do you think about them?" Jin Zuyan tapped his fingers on the armrest as he observed the children. From their gazes, he detected anger and hostility. Their loyalty lay with Gu Shao's. After a moment of silence, he said, "Comrade Gu, we can't accept your team." "Why not?" Gu Shao's asked with surprise. There were lots of teams recruiting people right now. As long as you were an ability user, you could join any team. While he knew that it wasn't easy to join the Phantom team, he was sure that with so many ability users in his team, they would be able to join. Unexpectedly, they were rejected. Jin Zuyan looked at the children and said, "My team only accepts members who are loyal to me and the team. Those who are loyal to others, no matter how strong or rare their abilities are useless in my eyes." Hearing these words, Gu Shao's was taken aback and turned to look at the children. The moment he met their gazes, they finally understood his words. He was delighted by their loyalty, but he also felt helpless. He didn't have the ability to take care of so many children, and even if he did, what he was doing was dangerous. Bringing them with him would put them in danger. He turned to Jin Zuyan and said, "Captain Jin, I can promise you that the children will follow your orders and be loyal to the team." "Comrade Gu, I don't trust empty promises. At this moment, I can see that your team members are hostile toward my team. I don't want to waste my time and effort on people who are unworthy," Jin Zuyan said nonchalantly. After a moment of pause, he added, "If you insist on joining my team, it's not impossible, but you have to pass my test first." "What test?" Gu Shao's asked. "Comrade Gu, we are going to clear out the zombie horde and will leave at noon. If your team wants to join mine, you only need to follow us and show us your team's capability. When you prove that you are worthy, I will welcome you," Jin Zuyan replied casually. Hearing this, Rong Mo frowned and said, "The number of zombies is more than 30,000. Bringing the children with us will put them in danger." As soon as she finished her words, Zhao Lijai asked, "Sister, you don't plan to continue shielding the children, do you?" "They are still young, there is nothing wrong with protecting them," Rong Mo replied. Zhao Lijai chuckled at her words and said, "Sister, we are facing an apocalypse. You might be able to protect them for a while, but can you protect them forever? Not to mention outside, even inside the safety zone, there is no guarantee that they won't face danger. Unless you stay with them 24 hours a day, it's impossible to fully protect them. What you are doing right now is harming them." Hearing this, Fu Lijian suddenly said, "Who said we need protection? When I get stronger, I will protect Sister more." The moment he said this, Zhao Lijai flicked her wrist, and 3 ice needles flew at him at high speed. Seeing the incoming attack, Gu Shao's and Rong Mo were shocked. Before they could do anything, the ice needles had already reached Fu Lijian. "Stop!" Rong Mo shouted in horror. Gu Shao's and his team thought Fu Lijian would be injured, but the ice needles stopped half a centimeter away from his eyes. Seeing this, the boy's knees weakened, and he fell to the ground with a thud. Sitting on the ground with a pale face, his back and forehead were covered in cold sweat, and his heart was beating so fast it felt like it might leap out of his chest the next second. The horror of brushing so closely with death made him unable to utter a word. Zhao Lijai looked at the boy coldly and said, "See, I can kill you as easily as stepping on an ant. In the apocalypse, no one will give you a chance to get stronger. The moment they detect hostility from you, they will remove you immediately. "Boy, do you think your sister Moore can protect you now?" she asked with an eerie smile. After she finished speaking, she snapped her fingers. The ice needles turned into a ball of water and flew at Fu Lijian's face. With a splash, the water pulled him out of his terror. While Gu Shao's and his team were shocked by what she did, the Phantom team looked at her with admiration. Compared to before, her speed in manipulating her water-type ability was much faster. Now, it only took her 1 or 2 seconds to change water into ice. Sitting on the couch, Jin Zuyan said, "Comrade Gu, you should go back with your team." The Phantom team members thought they would leave after what had just happened. Unexpectedly, the children stood there and looked at them without moving. Gu Shao's noticed that the way the children looked at the Phantom team was different from before. Now, there was no longer hostility in their eyes. Instead, he saw admiration and longing. He knew everyone wanted to get stronger, and he had to help them. After a moment of silence, he said, "Captain Jin, I agree to your test. My team will go with you to clear out the zombie horde." As soon as he said this, Rongmo held his arm and asked, "Shaos, do you know what you are saying? Bringing the children to that area." Before she finished her words, Zheng Changchao said, "Sister Mo, we want to go." When she looked at the children, she saw the determination in their eyes. After a moment, she finally said, "Okay, but Gyro Jiao has to stay behind." Seeing that the girl was too young, Jin Zuyan nodded and said, "No problem. She can stay here with my team when we go out." Okay. Chapter 275, A Test, 3. After they reached an agreement, the Wen brothers made several airguns and blades for them. As they handed the weapons to the children, they taught them how to use them. As for how they used them later, that wasn't their concern. 20 minutes before 8 o'clock, Jin Zuyan left with Zhang Yuan and Qin Luzi to attend a meeting with Wei Wying and his people. While the rest of the members were checking their equipment, Zhao Lijai walked around the survivor camp. Compared to the base, the conditions in the camp were very poor. This camp was similar to the slum areas of the big base in her previous life. That morning, another group of survivors had left the camp. Without the Phantom team escorting them, they didn't dare bring too many people, fearing they would attract zombies. But thanks to the road being fixed and cleared out by the Phantom team, the several hours of travel had been cut down to only 2. With only 4 hours needed for a round trip, they could escort 3 to 4 groups of survivors in a single day. After the evacuation, the camp was no longer as crowded as before, as most of the women, children, and elderly were already gone. As for the men, most of them were preparing for battle. No one knew when the zombie horde would arrive, so they had lived in fear these past days. Zhao Lijai observed the camp's defenses and shook her head. Fortunately, the zombie horde had been discovered early. Otherwise, when it arrived, it would have been too late to evacuate. With this level of defense, even a level 1 zombie could break into the camp easily, let alone a high-level one. As she walked, she arrived at the open field where the survivors waited for their turn to leave. Seeing her walking over, everyone's gaze landed on her. Compared to their dirty and unkempt appearances, her clean and neat appearance stood out like a sore thumb. The soldiers knew her identity, and one of them walked over and asked, "Comrade, what brings you here?" Zhao Lijai glanced at the survivors and asked, "Do they get food or water while they wait?" The soldier scratched his head for a moment before replying, "Comrade, we distributed water and food this morning." "How much do they receive daily?" she asked again. Due to limited supplies, everyone only gets 500 ml of water and a pack of crackers each day. Hearing the soldier's reply, Zhao Lijai frowned and asked, "Comrade, do you have any water containers?" The soldier nodded and replied, "Every one of us has a military canteen and 2 hydration bladders." Realizing he had misunderstood, Zhao Lijai clarified, "Not that kind. I mean a large container, like a pot or a water tank." This time, the soldier thought for a moment before pointing to a tent on the side and said, "We have an empty water tank over there." Zhao Lijai nodded and walked over. Before filling the tank, she asked, "Is the tank clean?" "Yeah, we clean it once a day." With that confirmation, Zhao Lijai said, "Comrade, please help me remove the lid." Although the soldiers didn't know what she was trying to do, they knew she was Jin Zuyan's girlfriend and a powerful ability user, so they removed the lid and stood aside. Under everyone's curious gazes, Zhao Lijai used her mind to shape her pond water into a ball. The next moment, she waved her hand and drew out the water. Seeing this, everyone assumed the water came from her ability. The pond water filled only 1/5 of the tank, so she created more water using her energy and filled it to the brim. With the pond water mixed in, it could help improve the survivors' immune systems, lowering the risk of illness. When they saw her filling the tank, everyone was surprised, but soon their eyes lit up with hope and expectation. After filling the tank, she waved her hand and took out a pile of supplies from her space. Instead of compressed biscuits, she brought out crackers, protein bars, chocolate, candies, and other dry foods. Seeing this, one of the soldiers asked, "Comrade, Comrade, please help me distribute the water and food to everyone, including the soldiers," Zhao Lijai said with a smile. As soon as they heard this, the soldiers responded, "Thank you, comrade." The survivors also heard her and quickly chimed in, "Thank you, benefactor." After giving out food and water, she continued touring the camp. Whenever she saw a group of soldiers, she would give them some water and food as well. At the same time, Jin Zuyin and his team had already taken their seats around a large oval table in the meeting room. Sitting across from them were the camp leaders and members of Wei Wang's team. Unlike the leaders at Zun Qi's base, who were mostly the mayor and government officials, the leaders in this camp came from several cities near Linan and the capital. As a result, there were more than 5 people holding the rank of colonel, though only one person held the rank of general. Jin Zuyin and his team had retired from the military, so even when meeting the leaders, they merely nodded in greeting and didn't perform a military salute. When the leaders saw this, some frowned in dissatisfaction, while others sighed quietly, feeling it was a pity to lose such valuable talents. At exactly 8 o'clock, Jin Zuyin finally spoke. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending this meeting on such short notice." Hearing his words, everyone's expressions turned serious, and they looked at him solemnly. After a brief pause, Jin Zuyin continued, "I believe everyone is aware that the situation regarding the zombie horde can no longer be delayed. Captain Jin, I heard that your team has scouted the area. Do you have an exact count of the zombies?" one of the colonels asked. Hearing this, Jin Zuyin glanced on his side, and Qin Luzi replied, "We can't determine the exact number of zombies in that area, but based on our scouting, we are confident that the number is more than 200,000. The moment he said this, everyone in the room drew a sharp breath. Chapter 276, A Test, 4. After a long silence, Jin Zuyin said, "In today's meeting, my team wants to know what everyone's plan is regarding the zombie horde." As soon as he said this, the general asked, "Captain Jin, do you have a plan?" "My plan is simple. After this meeting, my team and I will head to the border to clear out the zombies, while the Eagle team and the soldiers evacuate the survivors as soon as possible," Jin Zuyin replied calmly. Hearing this, the leaders exchanged glances. One of them asked, "Do you have the confidence to complete this mission successfully?" At that, Jin Zuyin let out a quiet chuckle before he said, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Everyone looked at him in confusion, but stayed silent. Tapping his fingers lightly on the table, he added, "My team and I are no longer soldiers. We have no obligation to protect anyone. We are not doing this as part of any mission. Let me be clear, my team is now a mercenary team. We act for profit. With a horde that large, the number of crystal cores we can harvest makes the effort worthwhile." After he finished, one of the colonels frowned and said, "Captain Jin, even if you have submitted a resignation letter, you still need authorization before you can retire from the military. Without approval from the capital, you and your team are technically still active duty soldiers. Protecting the country and the people is your duty." Most of the others nodded in agreement after hearing his words. But Qin Luzi scoffed at the remark and said, "Old man, do you really think we still call you colonel because we still think of ourselves as soldiers? We are just giving you face. In this situation, I would like to see who has the power to stop us from retiring." As he finished speaking, he flicked his wrist. Whoosh, crack, boom. In less than a second, a wind blade flew past the colonel's head and slammed into the wall behind him, leaving a deep, jagged crack as debris fell to the floor. Everyone was stunned. The colonel's face went pale. He hadn't even seen the attack, he only knew he had just brushed past death. Feeling a sharp sting on his cheek, he reached up and touched it. His fingers came away sticky with blood. Are you trying to kill your supervisor?" he stammered in disbelief. "I'm just showing you the truth," Qin Luzi said calmly. "With my ability, I could kill everyone in this room with a flick of my fingers." Looking around the room, he continued, "We are living in an apocalypse now. The laws of the old world no longer apply. With so many powerful ability users appearing, do you really think the government can control everyone? Instead of clinging to the past, you would be better off adapting to the present. You need to find a way to manage this chaos. Expecting soldiers to keep sacrificing for the public when they get nothing in return. Wake up, that dream is over. What's more, I'm sure the officials sitting in the capital are no longer the same as before. After his speech, Wei Wying lowered his gaze. He had seen too much over the past few weeks, friends and family betraying each other for a bite of food or a sip of water. Coupled with how his direct supervisor had treated him, he had already decided to retire after this crisis. Becoming a mercenary didn't sound so bad anymore, so when Phantom openly defied the leaders, he stayed silent. After a moment, the general asked, "Captain Jin, what do you want from us?" Finally hearing the question he had been waiting for, Jin Zuyin smiled and replied, "General, we are willing to protect everyone and eliminate the zombie horde, but only if the price is right." The general thought for a moment and asked, "How much do you want?" 50 million yuan. Jin Zuyin laughed when he heard his words and said, "We don't want that useless paper. Right now, only crystal cores and supplies hold value. My team doesn't need supplies, so we will only accept crystal cores." Raising one of his fingers, he said, 100,000 crystal cores, and every crystal core and supply we collect during the mission belongs to us. At this, the camp accountant said nervously, "Captain Jin, we don't have that many. We only have around 80,000 cores at most." "That's not my concern. If you want us to protect the leaders and the survivors, that's the price," Jin Zuyin replied casually. The general frowned, weighing the pros and cons. It wasn't impossible to gather 100,000 cores. Though the general public only knew that crystals could help ability users recover energy, the government had been quietly organizing missions to harvest them, but paying that amount would wipe out their entire stockpile. Still, comparing the mission's danger with the Phantom team's price, it became clear the crystals might be even more valuable than they realized. Just as hesitation filled the room, the general suddenly said, "It's not impossible to pay you, but you will have to escort us to the capital afterward." Jin Zuyin shook his head and said, "General, escorting you to the capital is a whole different mission. You know how dangerous it is out there. For that, the price is 1 million crystal cores. Otherwise, we are not taking the job." One of the soldiers stood up in anger. He pointed at him and said, "Captain Jin, don't push your luck. I have named my price. It's up to the general to accept or decline," Jin Zuyin said flatly. Then he glanced at his watch and added, "You have got 1 minute to decide. After that, the deal's off the table." As the seconds ticked by, the general's frown deepened, but just before the minute was up, he finally said, "All right." Jin Zuyin nodded and said, "Good. Since you want to go to the capital, your team can follow mine. Once we eliminate the horde, you can pass the border safely." Chapter 277, A Test, 5. Before leaving the meeting room, Jin Zuyin added, "General, my team only accepts upfront payment. Prepare the crystal cores. We leave the camp in 30 minutes. With that, he turned and walked out, Zhang Yuan and Qin Luzi following close behind. After they left, one of the colonels turned to Wei Wying and said, "Captain Wei, your team will come with us to the capital. You will be responsible for protecting us." Wei Wying stood up and replied, "Colonel, my team is in charge of escorting the survivors and managing the evacuation. We can't follow you." The moment he finished speaking, Wei Wying gave them a military salute and left the room with his team. When the news spread that the Phantom team was going to clear out the zombie horde, everyone in the camp was stunned. Many lamented that they were taking a suicide mission. As whispers circulated throughout the camp, Jin Zuyin looked at his team and said, "There is a change of plans. In addition to clearing out the horde, we will also ensure the leaders' safety as they cross the border. Sister Jiang, Brother Bohai, you two will head to Zun Chi's base with Mo Junji. Take the younger children with you. Zyro Kai, prepare enough supplies and water to last them a week." After giving his orders, he looked at the rest of the team and added, "We will probably have to spend 2 to 3 days clearing the zombies. After that, we will continue to sweep the area around Zun Chi's base and expand the territory." "Understood," the members replied in unison. Checking his watch, Jin Zuyin said, "Pack up, it's time to move out." Knowing they would face a massive horde, Zhao Lijai prepared extra pond water and crystal cores for the team. She glanced over at Gu Shao's and his group, and hesitated for a moment before finally walking over. Seeing her approach, Gu Shao smiled and asked, "Junior sister, do you need something?" With a wave of her hand, Zhao Lijai took out compressed biscuits, protein bars, and bottles of pond water from her space. She looked at them and said, "Senior, these are for you and your team. The situation ahead will be dangerous. It's better if the children have some crystals and water with them." After she finished her words, she turned and headed to her boyfriend's car. When they arrived at the camp's gate, they found a large group of people waiting. Jin Zuyan parked his car and stepped out with Zhao Lijai. Standing before the general, he asked, "General, did you bring the crystals?" The general glanced at one of his subordinates. Receiving the order, the soldier stepped forward and handed over a bag. Zhao Lijai opened it, checked quickly, and nodded. She didn't count each crystal, but as someone who had used crystal cores as currency for years, she could tell there were around 100,000 inside. Even if there was a discrepancy, it wouldn't be more than 100. After confirming the payment, Jin Zuyan said, "General, you and your people can follow my team." Without waiting for a reply, the two of them returned to their armored vehicle and drove off. Seeing this, the general walked to his own car and followed. At the entrance, Wei Wying watched them leave and said, "Zyro Han, inform everyone to take anything useful with them." Startled by this order, Zyro Han asked, "Captain, aren't we coming back?" "No, after this crisis is over, I'm retiring and becoming a mercenary," Wei Wying replied calmly. "Captain, you are retiring?" his team members asked, shocked. Wei Wying looked at them and asked, "Do you think there is still a point to stay? If even the leaders can abandon the people, what guarantee do we have that the government will stay the same and protect the people?" The team fell silent at his words, each one recalling the events of the past few weeks. "I will continue to follow you, Captain," Zyro Han said. Wei Wying was taken aback by this and said, "Zyro Han, you still have a wife and children in the capital. You need to consider them." Clenching his fists, Zyro Han replied after a moment of silence, "My wife and children are gone. I received news of their deaths this morning." "What happened? Weren't they still fine the last time you contacted them?" Wei Wying asked, stunned. "I don't know the exact details, but a friend told me they died of starvation." The words hit like a thunderclap. Silence fell in the area. They had been risking their lives to protect strangers, while their loved ones in the capital died of hunger. A chill swept through the group as their hearts turned cold. If the government could treat the families of active duty soldiers like that, what reason did they have to believe they would honor their sacrifices and treat their families well after their death? Sensing the low mood, Wei Wying said, "Everyone, find out your family's situations. After this crisis, we will head to the capital and bring them back." The soldiers straightened and responded in unison, "Understood." With Wei Wying giving the order, the evacuation went into full swing. 5 hours later, the last group of survivors finally left the camp, accompanied by the Eagle team and the remaining soldiers. At the same time, Jin Zuyan and his team had crossed the border. When they were about 15 kilometers away, he picked up his walkie-talkie and said, "There is a small hotel up ahead. Everyone, we will stop there." After issuing the order, he drove into the hotel parking lot and stepped out of his car. Before long, his team arrived one after another, followed by the leaders and their people. Standing outside the hotel, Qin Luzi said, "Captain, there are only a few scattered zombies inside." Jin Zuyan nodded and said, "Take a few of our members and clear the building." Under Qin Luzi's lead, the team entered the building. Chapter 278, A Test, 6. Meanwhile, the leaders exited their vehicles and walked over. Standing not far from Jin Zuyan, one of the colonels asked, "Captain Jin, are you planning to rest here?" Ignoring him, Jin Zuyan turned to the general and said, "General, you and your people can wait here temporarily. We will come back to pick you up once we are done." The general looked at the abandoned building with a frown but said nothing. 10 minutes later, Qin Luzi emerged with the rest of the team. "Captain, the building is clear," he reported. Jin Zuyan gave a nod and said, "General, you and your team should stay inside and don't come out unless it's necessary." "I understand," the general replied calmly. With that, Jin Zuyan glanced at his team before heading back to his car and driving off, followed closely by the others. Sitting in the passenger seat, Zhao Lijai leaned back with her eyes closed. She didn't care about the leaders at that moment. She was inside her spiritual space, watering medicinal herbs with pond water using her consciousness. Half an hour later, Qin Luzi's voice came through the walkie-talkie, "Captain, the zombies are up ahead." We will proceed on foot from here, Jin Zuyan replied. The cars were parked along the road. After everyone got out, Zhao Lijai stored their armored vehicles and Gu Shao's cars in her space. Before leaving, Jin Zuyan said, Gu Shao's, you and your girlfriend will stay in the middle of the formation with the children. Without my order, none of you are allowed to leave the formation. Realizing that their test had begun, Gu Shao's and his team responded in unison, understood. With them positioned in the center, Qin Luzi and the Wen brothers led the group at the front, while Zhao Lijai and Jin Zuyan took the rear to guard against any sudden threats. The rest of the members positioned themselves on the sides. 20 minutes later, they heard the roars of zombies not far from their location. Listening closely, Jin Zuyan scanned the surroundings and said, the zombie horde is indeed moving toward the border. Wenmo Wenkai blocked the road. Understood. Upon receiving the order, the two clapped their hands and pressed them to the ground. In the next moment, a metal wall began to rise from the earth. As the wall grew taller, it extended outward to either side. Gu Shao's and his team were stunned, watching in disbelief with wide eyes. While they thought that the Wen brothers' abilities were impressive, Wenmo and Wenkai, in fact, had already found a way to combine their abilities and maximize their effectiveness. There was metal in the soil, and with Wenkai adding more metal to it, Wenmo could manipulate the existing metal and the added metal to create the metal wall. Even after constructing a 3-meter-high wall, 2 meters thick and stretching over 200 meters, they showed no signs of exhaustion. 10 minutes later, the Wen brothers took out golden-colored crystal cores from their pockets and began absorbing the energy while continuing to build the wall. Since the zombie horde was estimated at over 200,000, they had to extend the wall to a full 500 meters to block it off. 20 minutes later, they finally stood up and reported, Captain, it's done. Jin Zuyan nodded and wrapped an arm around his girlfriend's waist before leaping to the top of the wall. Seeing this, the rest of the team jumped up one by one. Standing below the wall, Gu Shao's and Rong Mo looked at the children, then carried them up. Once atop the wall, they could finally see the black dots in the distance. The moment the children saw the sheer number of zombies, their faces turned pale and they trembled in fear. Noticing their fear, Zhao Lijai said, Don't worry. Even if you can't kill them, you won't be eaten as long as you stay here. I will kill them, Fu Lizhen replied stubbornly after hearing her words. Seeing the determination in his eyes, Zhao Lijai said, It will be a long battle. If you are tired, take a rest. Overusing your energy will only make you become useless in a prolonged battle. Just as she finished speaking, Qin Luzi called out, They are here. And with that, he leapt from the wall and flew toward the zombies. Seeing this, Gu Shao's and his team were shocked. Brother Shao's, he is flying, Su Danyu exclaimed with awe and shock. Xirokai raised his chin proudly and said, Flying is just one of Brother Luzi's skills. Don't be surprised when you see what else we can do. As his words fell, they watched Qin Luzi hovering above the zombie horde. Booms, 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 boom. In the next moment, a series of explosions erupted, killing large groups of zombies instantly. Zroar! The noise stirred the horde. No longer moving slowly, the zombies began rushing forward excitedly. Seeing this, Qin Luzi flew back toward the wall. Boom, booms, boom. As he landed, he snapped his fingers and more explosions detonated behind him. Once he stood on the wall, he said, These zombies were too slow, so I had to lure them in. Xirokai laughed and said, Brother Luzi, you are the best. Zroar! As the zombies were within 5 meters of the metal wall area, the team pulled out their airguns and began shooting. Pop, pop, pop. Crack, crack, crack. Seeing this, Gu Shao snapped out of his daze and said, Everyone, focus on killing the ones nearby. Yes, brother, the children replied in unison. As the battle started, Li Kixuan watched Qin Luzi thoughtfully. He hadn't expected a wind-type ability user to be this powerful. He was able to kill so many zombies with just a snap of his fingers. Noticing Li Kixuan standing still, Chen Ji nudged him and asked, Brother Lei, what are you doing standing there in a daze? If you don't start killing, you will be the one washing clothes later. Chapter 279, Display of Power 1. Hearing Chen Ji's words, Li Kixuan asked as he pulled out his airguns and started shooting, what do you mean? Did you forget our bet this morning? Whoever kills the least zombies has to wash everyone's clothes for 3 days, Chen Ji reminded him. That was serious, Li Kixuan asked with raised eyebrows. Of course, Chen Ji replied matter-of-factly. Despite the members being able to kill the zombies using the air guns, the number of zombies was too many, and after an hour, the zombies had started climbing the wall. With more and more zombies' corpses piled up under the wall, the zombies stepped on them and reached out their hands upwards while roaring. Seeing this, Jin Zuyan raised his hand, and a massive black fireball flew towards the zombies. Boom! The fireball explodes upon contact and blows a large group of zombies to pieces. As the black flame burned, he used his energy to control the black flame and spread it towards the surrounding zombies. Standing on top of the wall, everyone saw how the black flame was coming to life and burned every zombie that made contact with it. In just a few minutes, all of the zombies' corpses under the wall and all of the zombies within 20 meters of the wall had turned into ashes, leaving the glistening crystal cores behind. After burning the zombies, Jin Zuyan held his girlfriend's hand and transferred the energy absorbed by his black flame to her. Since Zhao Lijai didn't use her ability, her energy was still full. The moment she received the energy transfusion from her boyfriend, she felt the energy inside her body bloating and almost overflowing. Before she could feel the pain of overflowing energy, her space suddenly shook, and all of the energy coming from Jin Zuyan was absorbed by her space. Noticing this, Zhao Lijai's eyes flashed with surprise. She quickly used her consciousness to check her space and saw the cold energy seeping into the pond, the black soil, grassland, and even the sky. As the energy was absorbed by her space, the fog covering the border of her space was pushed back and went further. Raising her head, she noticed that as the fog covering the sky receded, the previously dimmed light became brighter, as if the cloudy sky was slowly clearing up. Now she could even feel the breeze. While she felt that a long time had passed, it was only 2 minutes in reality. Jin Zuyan noticed his girlfriend was suddenly standing there in a daze, and asked with worry, Aitg, what's wrong? Hearing his voice, she snapped back from her thoughts and said, Brother Yan, can you transfer more energy to me? The moment he heard this, he said, Aitg, you didn't use your ability. If I continue transferring energy to you, you will explode from the overflow. Noticing his worries, Zhao Lijai pulled at his collar. When he leaned down, she tiptoed and whispered in his ear, Brother Yan, my space can absorb the energy you transfer, and it seems that my space is getting bigger after absorbing your energy. When he heard this, he raised his eyebrows and asked teasingly, Aitg, isn't this equal to you absorbing my yang energy? As soon as she heard his words, images unsuitable for children flashed in Zhao Lijai's mind. Her cheeks flushed, and she glared at him while saying, We are in the middle of a battle. What nonsense are you saying? Watching his cute girlfriend puffing her cheeks, Jin Zuyan chuckled and said, Okay, I will say it after the battle. Zhao Lijai rolled her eyes at him, too lazy to bother with him. Since his girlfriend had already made a request, Jin Zuyan no longer held back. Turning to his team, he said, Everyone, it's time to train your ability. The moment they heard this, the Phantom team members holstered their air guns and raised their hands. Standing not far from them, Gu Shao's and his team watched them in anticipation. Rumors said that each of the Phantom team's members was very strong, but so far, not many had seen their true power. Now, they finally had the chance to see if the rumors were true or just an exaggeration. Before everyone could launch their attacks, Zhao Lijai had already raised her hand and created a massive water ball. Seeing this, Li Kixuan raised his eyebrows. He had met several water-type ability users after the apocalypse, and none of them had any attack power. They could only use their ability to provide water for drinking. She didn't plan to use that water ball to smash the zombies, did she? He thought inwardly. Not far from him, Fu Lijian pulled at Su Danyu's sleeve and asked in a low voice, That sister didn't think that using a big water ball could deal any damage to the zombies, did she? How would I know? I'm a space-type ability user, not a water-type, Su Danyu replied as he shrugged. Just after he finished his words, Zhao Lijai threw the massive water ball toward the zombies. As it flew at a fast speed, she waved her hands and the water ball exploded in midair. The explosion killed a group of zombies under it. When everyone thought that it was the end of her attack, countless water balls floated in the air and turned into ice needles in a few seconds. With another wave of her hands, the ice needles flew toward the surrounding zombies and pierced through their skulls and bodies.
Crack, crack, crack. It's raw.
In less than 3 minutes, she had killed several hundred zombies, leaving Lee Kixuan, Gu Shao's and his team stunned. Not knowing that her experiment with new skills had shocked her team, Zhao Lijai continued controlling her ice needles as she killed zombies. Seeing that the zombies' corpses were piling up again, Jin Zuyin used his black flame to burn them into ashes. At the same time, the energy absorbed into his body was transferred to his girlfriend. Chapter 280, Display of Power 2. Not far from them, Yu Feiyan said, "Damn, if this continues, all of us have to wash Captain and sister-in-law's clothes for a month." After he said this, he raised his hands, and 2 tornadoes appeared from the middle of the zombie horde. "Feiyan, your ability is wind type," Li Sikai asked with delight. Yu Feiyan nodded and replied with a grin, "Brother Sikai, I just noticed that I awakened a wind type ability yesterday." Hearing this, Li Sikai nodded and said, "That's great. It's hard to ask Luzi to sweep the floor. In the future, the task of sweeping the house will be left to you." The moment he heard this, Yu Feiyan almost choked on his saliva. He had awakened a strong ability, yet instead of praising him, his brother treated him as a vacuum cleaner. Where was the justice? Following Yu Feiyan's attack, Li Sikai opened his palm, and 3 lightning balls floated above it. As he waved his hand, the lightning balls flew towards the zombies in several directions. Boom, booms, boom. The lightning balls were only the size of a ping-pong ball, but the moment they touched the zombies, the explosions shook the ground, and the damage caused was equal to a C4 bomb, minus the toxicity and side effects after explosions. As the lightning balls exploded, Fu Lijian was stunned. He was also a lightning-type ability user, but the strongest attack he had was a lightning bolt. His lightning bolt could stun the zombies and buy time for his team members to kill the zombie, but if he wanted to kill the zombie using his ability, he needed at least 3 lightning bolts. He had always felt proud of his ability, but compared to the Phantom Team's members, he was nothing. Only now did he realize why they looked down on him and his team. In front of them, his team was as weak as ants. While Gu Shao's team members were shocked, Li Kixuan was not much better. He always thought that with his strong ability, the only one who could rival him was Jin Zuyin, but now he started to doubt his thoughts. I have never seen them before in the facility, so how could their abilities be this strong? Thinking about how Jin Zuyin looked at him before, it seemed that he had to show his strength. Otherwise, he might be kicked out of the team. With this thought, he no longer hesitated and raised his hand. The next moment, a blue flame dragon flew out from his palm and rushed toward the zombies. Compared to the red flame dragon before, this flame dragon was bigger and stronger. As it flew past the zombies, it only took half a minute to turn them into ashes. As he controlled the blue flame dragon, he glanced at Jin Zuyin and saw him raise his eyebrows. While there was a hint of appreciation in his eyes, there was no surprise. It was as if he had guessed the power of his fire-type ability. Thinking about Jin Zuyin's black flame, a rare emotion of competitiveness surged in his heart. For an unknown reason, he didn't want to lose to him. With one hand controlling the blue flame dragon, he raised his other hand. In the blink of an eye, the sky suddenly darkened, and a massive dark cloud gathered above the zombies. Crack, boom, boom, boom. As he swung down his hand, several huge thunderbolts crashed down from the dark cloud and hit the ground. The thunderbolts exploded upon contact and killed the zombies instantly, leaving a huge crater on the ground. This time, surprise finally flashed in Jin Zuyin's eyes. He had long suspected that Li Kixuan was not as simple as everyone thought. As one of the facility's top ranks on the wanted list, it was impossible for him to be ordinary. His surprise only lasted for a moment, but for the rest of the members, they were so shocked that they couldn't help but blink and rub their eyes just to make sure they didn't see it wrong. Vice Captain, how can he be a dual ability user? What's more, blue flame and silver-purple lightning, both are mutated abilities, Zhao Lijai muttered in disbelief. In her memories, her vice captain was someone with an ordinary fire-type ability, but with his strong perseverance and hard work, he was able to become one of the renowned ability users. Even in her wildest dreams, she never expected him to be this strong at the beginning of the apocalypse. Even though she was shocked by Li Kixuan's display of power, she didn't dwell on this matter for too long. Everyone has their own secrets. Perhaps in her previous life, something happened to her vice captain that caused him to lose his strong ability. If that was the case, then she would have to do her best to help him avoid the same ending in this life, to repay for his kindness in her previous life. After regaining her composure, she continued killing the zombies. With the huge amount of energy supply from her boyfriend, she would be able to fight for a long time while, at the same time, her space continued to expand. The rest of the members were unwilling to be outdone and racked their brains to find a way to maximize the power of their abilities while reducing energy consumption. During this battle, only Gu Shaoz and his team needed to rest once every half hour. Most of the Phantom team members, including Li Qixuan, only took a rest after 5 hours of battle. While they were resting, Jin Zuyan and Zhao Lijai held the fort and continued. They only stopped to take a rest when the sky had changed color. Looking at the number of zombies below, Jin Zuyan said, "Old Zhang, split the team into 2 groups. Take turns to rest every 4 hours." Hearing this, Zhang Yuan nodded and said, "Understood." With him arranging the team, Jin Zuyan and Zhao Lijai rested on the side and had their meal. Since they couldn't build a fire and cook, they had a self-heating meal instead. Chapter 281, Expansion. Zhao Lijai filled the bottom part with hot water, and they waited for a while before the meal was cooked. While eating, Jin Zuyan observed the battle situation and the members' condition. As for Zhao Lijai, she was checking her space. The moment she saw her space, she was shocked. She quickly opened the space's setting panel and read the information. The grassland area had increased by 10 hectares, the farmland had increased by 300 m2, and the yield had also increased to 15 kg per m2. Besides the land, the pond had also become deeper. Now, it was 17 meters deep, with every liter of pond water containing energy equal to 7% of a level 1 crystal core. As she continued to read the information, she realized that now there was additional information added to the panel. It turned out her space had a sky, and the limit was 300 meters from the ground. The oxygen production had also increased by 10%, while the consumption of oxygen had decreased by 50%. Without even calculating, she knew that by this point alone, she would no longer be worried about running out of oxygen when staying inside her space. The last upgrade was the decrease of the planting cycle. The time needed for the crops planted on the farmland to mature had decreased by 50%. This would increase the production by a huge amount. After reading all the information, she took several deep breaths to calm down. She didn't know what triggered this expansion, as it was not the first time she received an energy transfer from her boyfriend, but no matter what the reason was, this expansion was a good thing for her. Since there was an additional 300 m2 of farmland, she decided to plant another 100 m2 of wheat, then use the remaining land to plant corn and sweet potato. Staple food was still her main goal for now. When she was done arranging her space, she raised her eyes and met her boyfriend's deep gaze. Jin Zuyan noticed his girlfriend's eyes suddenly lose focus, as if she were daydreaming. After learning about her space, he had a bold guess that maybe his girlfriend could enter her space just using her consciousness. So after he finished his food, he watched her for a long time until she regained her senses. Seeing how flustered she was, he let out a chuckle and said, "Aitg, if you continue daydreaming, your food will turn cold." Zhao Lijai quickly nodded and finished her food. While the Phantom team was busy killing zombies, Wei Wying and his team were in a meeting with Zun Qi's team. At that moment, they were sitting in Zun Qi's office, across from each other. "Captain Zun, these are the name lists and supplies we brought from the survivors' camp," Zyro Han said as he handed over a folder. Zun Qi opened the folder and read through the documents. The name lists not only recorded the survivors' names, but also their age, birthday, place of birth, and family members. In the information column, details regarding their status were also recorded. Those with abilities were tested and ranked based on their strength and combat capability. After reading the name lists, Zun Qi asked, "Old Wei, what's your next plan?" "Zun Qi, I plan to retire and form a mercenary team," Wei Wying replied calmly. Hearing this, Zun Qi was taken aback and asked again, "Old Wei, you are not planning to bring the survivors back to camp and establish your own base?" Shaking his head, Wei Wying said, "I'm not suited to manage a base. You know me, rather than sitting in an office handling documents, I prefer going on missions." Thinking about their years of working together, Zun Qi knew that, for Wei Wying, sitting in an office was torture. After a moment of silence, he let out a sigh and said, "Since you have made up your mind, I won't force you. As for the survivors, after the crisis at the border is resolved, I will inform everyone of the situation and let them decide for themselves. If they want to stay, I will welcome them. If they choose to leave, I won't stop them either," he added. Hearing this, Wei Wying grinned and said, "Zun Qi, I have seen your base's condition. I know that most of the survivors won't leave even after the crisis is over. Compared to other places, your base has the best public security and supplies. Sun Qi smiled at that and replied, without the Phantom Team's help, that wouldn't have been possible. Nodding at his words, Wei Wang asked, Sun Qi, I heard that Captain Jin and his team are staying at your base. Is that true? Where did you hear that from? Sun Qi asked, raising his eyebrows. From members of the Phantom Team. Leaning back in his chair, Sun Qi nodded and replied, they are indeed staying at my base for now. If you want to stay too, I can prepare a house for you and your team. The moment he heard this, Wei Wang smiled and said, then please arrange a house near the Phantom Team. Although Sun Qi didn't know what he was planning, he knew that Wei Wang was not someone who would harm others, so he nodded and said, no problem. All right, I will go register my team first. See you next time, Wei Wang said as he stood up. Before he left, Sun Qi added, Old Wei, after you finish your registration, you can find my men. They will show you to your new residence. Okay, thank you. Not long after the Eagle team left, Sun Qi looked at his adjutant and asked, Han Li, have the new members of the Phantom Team settled in? When Han Li nodded and replied, Captain, they have already gone to the house allocated for their team and are currently resting. Nodding, Sun Qi said, send some medicine over for coughs and colds to them. Also prepare a house for Old Wei and his team. While Wen Hanley didn't understand his captain's intention, he still made a note and said, understood. Chapter 282, Rank and Point System, 1. Meanwhile, in the administrative building, Wei Wang and his team stood outside. Looking at his team members, he said, everyone, from today onwards, we are no longer soldiers but mercenaries. Upon hearing this, the Eagle team members nodded and replied, Captain, we will follow you. Good, even if I can't promise you a luxurious life, I can promise that you and your families will have enough food and clothes, Wei Wang said firmly. Thank you, Captain. After a brief conversation, they entered the building. The moment they walked in, everyone turned to look at them. Compared to other teams, their military uniforms stood out. Combined with their physiques and composed demeanors, it was easy to see they were trained soldiers. As they walked toward the registration counter, they observed their surroundings. Besides the registration counter, there were several others, for taking missions, reporting mission completion, and collecting rewards. At the center of the hall stood several wooden boards. One board was used for missing person posts, another displayed hiring posts. The hiring posts were mostly filled with people looking for bodyguards or escort teams to protect them during travel. In addition, 2 more boards were used by the base to issue official missions. Feeling curious, Wei Wang walked over to check the mission lists. Standing near the board, he raised his eyebrows when he saw that the missions were divided by rank. The lowest rank was the F-rank mission, which mostly involved tasks inside the base. The highest missions on the board were B-rank, which were escorting people to other cities, retrieving supplies, or rescuing trapped individuals. Above B-rank were A-rank, S-rank, and SS-rank missions. At the moment, there were no missions listed under those ranks, but even if there were, no one would be able to take them. After reviewing the mission board, the Eagle team finally walked towards the registration counter. At that time, several other groups were also registering their teams. While waiting in line, Wei Wang considered the rankings and decided to start with C-rank missions for now. 30 minutes later, it was their turn. The soldier behind the counter saw them and immediately stood up. Saluting, he said, Captain Wei. Seeing this, Wei Wang and his team returned the salute before Wei Wang said, at ease. Captain Wei, what brings you here? The soldier asked. Comrade, I'm no longer a soldier. My team is here to register as a mercenary team, Wei Wang replied with a smile. When they heard his words, the surrounding soldiers were surprised. Everyone had already heard that the Phantom team was no longer active in the military and had registered as a mercenary team. Now, the Eagle team was doing the same. It seemed the rumors were true. The central government was no longer what it used to be. Thinking this, many felt fortunate to be under Sun Qi's leadership. He had even sent out teams to search for their families and bring them to safety. After a moment of silence, the soldier collected himself and sat down. Taking out a form and pen from the drawer, he said, Captain Wei, please fill this out. Taking the pen, Wei Wang began to complete the form. While he was writing, the soldier explained, To register a team, the fee is 10 crystal cores. Each team receives 10 emblems. Each emblem is assigned to one member and stores their information. For each additional member beyond 10, it's 1 core per emblem. Wei Wang nodded and replied, okay. Once your team is registered, you can take F rank, E rank and D rank missions, the soldier added. Hearing this, Wei Wang paused his writing and asked, we can't take missions higher than D rank. Captain Wei, if your team wants to take higher ranked missions, you must first meet the requirements. What are the requirements? Wei Wang asked. To qualify for C rank missions, your team must complete at least 20 D rank missions, 50 E rank missions, or 100 F rank missions, the soldier replied. Wei Wang thought for a moment and asked, comrade, can we check the D rank missions here? The soldier nodded and replied, of course. The missions posted on the board are generally easier. The more difficult ones can only be accessed here. Comrade, besides completing missions, is there another way for our team to qualify for higher ranked missions? Zyro Han asked. There is a point system, the soldier nodded. Each mission grants points according to rank. One F rank mission is worth 10 points, an E rank is 20 points, and a D rank is 50 points. Once a team accumulates 1,000 points, they can apply to upgrade their team's rank from D rank to C rank, he explained. Teams have ranks too, Zyro Han asked, surprised. Of course, the soldier nodded. He took out a folder and showed them the list of registered mercenary teams, explaining as he flipped through the pages. Team ranks are assessed based on the number of ability users, combat strength, and total team size. For example, this team here has 5 members but only 2 ability users. Due to their low combat strength, they are ranked as E rank. Teams without ability users and have at least 10 members are ranked as F rank. Flipping another page, the soldier added, in this base, only the Phantom team has been assessed as S rank. They have 19 members and all of them are ability users. Their combat power is the best in the base. So far, no other team has matched them. How many points are needed to reach S rank? One Eagle team member asked. To become an S rank team, you need 200,000 points. At his words, the Eagle team exchanged glances. Wei Wang, however, remained calm. Before the apocalypse, both of their teams had stood on equal footing. But now, the gap in strength between the Phantom and Eagle teams was as far as heaven and earth. If faced with a zombie horde, they would likely be wiped out. The Phantom team, on the other hand, could clear hordes and come out unscathed. That fact alone was enough to prove the difference in their strength. Chapter 283, Rank and Point System, 2. After Wei Wang finished the form, he handed it over to the soldier. He then pulled out 23 crystal cores from his backpack and said, my team has 23 members. Here is the registration fee and payment for the extra emblems. The soldier accepted the payment and checked the form. After a moment he said, Captain Wei, the emblems will be ready by the day after tomorrow. As for the identification cards, please wait here. They will be ready in an hour or 2. Comrade, what are the identification cards for? Wei Wang asked. Knowing that not everyone was familiar with the bases system, the soldier explained with a smile, Captain Wei, when you register your team, you will receive ID cards proving your membership in the base. These cards will contain your personal information and function like the old ATM cards before the apocalypse. When you complete missions, you can store your point rewards on your ID card and use them for purchases inside the base. He then pulled out a thick book and said, this is the list of supplies and items you can exchange for points. Curious, Wei Wang flipped through the book. Besides essentials like food, water, and medicine, there were daily necessities, hygiene products, weapons, and even snacks. Points could also be exchanged for crystal cores, which were more convenient when traveling outside the base. After all, the base's point system was only valid internally. Elsewhere, crystal cores were still the standard currency. He flipped further and stopped at the housing page. After reading for a moment, he asked, Comrade, can we buy a house too? The soldier nodded and replied, we are currently expanding the base. For now, we have apartments, houses, and villas available for rent or purchase. In the future, we plan to build low-cost housing for those who can't afford apartments. Hearing this, the Eagle team was surprised. They had always known Zun Qi was a capable leader, but they hadn't expected this level of foresight. With this point system, the base was gradually rebuilding a society similar to the pre-apocalypse era. With ranked missions, even ordinary people could earn points. This would reduce crime and improve quality of life. After explaining the exchange value of crystal cores and points, the soldier handed over a booklet and said, "Comrade, this contains the base's rules and punishment. Please read it carefully to avoid violations and penalties." Accepting the booklet, Wei Wang said, "Thank you, comrade." While the Eagle team waited for their ID cards, the leaders were having dinner in a small hotel near the border of Linen City. As they ate dried food, they stared out the window in a daze. Even from such a distance, they could still hear the zombies' roars and the sounds of battle. Every so often, the ground would shake, followed by bright flashes of light in the distance. Since the apocalypse began, most of them had stayed in the camp, giving orders from behind desks. They didn't go out to fight the zombies. Even when they did leave the camp, they were heavily escorted by soldiers, so they never truly understood how bad the situation outside was. Now, with fewer soldiers accompanying them, they finally realized how dangerous the world had become. Thinking about it, they began to see how flawed their previous method of managing the camp had been. While the leaders were deep in thought, the soldiers nearby gazed toward the zombie horde in the distance. As active soldiers, they longed to join the battle, but with their orders to escort the leaders, they could only stand by and follow commands, feeling useless and restless. Standing by the window, some of the soldiers began to reflect on their decision to remain in the army. Others had already made up their minds to retire and become mercenaries. Rather than continue to follow people who only knew how to hide and did nothing to help the people, they would rather go out and help those in need however they could. Under this heavy and conflicted atmosphere, the night deepened and the red moon rose in the sky. A few kilometers from the hotel, Jin Zuyin glanced up at the red moon and reminded his team, "Everyone, be careful. The zombies will get stronger now." Understood, the Phantom team members responded in unison. Standing beside her boyfriend, Zhao Lijai quietly observed the members and noticed signs of fatigue among them. Waving her hands, she absorbed the energy from her water blades back into her body. Turning to Jin Zuyin, she said, "Brother Yan, I will go give the members some crystal cores, food and water." Jin Zuyin nodded and replied, "Okay." Boom! With a wave of his hand, another black fireball flew toward the zombies below and exploded upon contact. Zhao Lijai made her way to Gu Shao's team and said, "Senior Gu, you and your team should take a break. The children won't last much longer if they keep fighting like this." She took out some self-heating meals, several gallons of her pond water, and a bag of crystal cores from her space. Handing the bag to Gu Shao's, she said, "Senior, once your team has eaten, let them get some sleep." Gu Shao's opened his mouth to refuse, but Rong Mo accepted the bag first and said, "Thank you, sister." Zhao Lijai nodded and continued checking on the others. Compared to Gu Shao's team, the rest of the members were trained soldiers. Even though Li Kixuan and Feng Yun weren't trained soldiers, their abilities and stamina were far better, so they weren't as exhausted. When she checked on Feng Yun, he looked sleepy but not overly tired. He decided to take a short nap before returning to the fight. As for Li Kixuan, he didn't appear tired at all. In fact, he looked even more energized than before. Seeing her walking over, he grinned and asked, "Little sister, are you worried about me and came to check on me?" Zhao Lijai was used to her vice-captain's teasing in her previous life. So now, even after hearing it again, she remained as calm as a monk. Chapter 284, The First Mutant. Taking out some food, pond water, and crystal cores from her space, Zhao Lijai handed them over to Li Kixuan and said, "Brother, you should rest a little even if you are not tired. This battle might last for a few days, so don't overwork yourself and faint later." After she finished her words, she smiled and returned to Jin Zuyin's side. Looking at her back, Li Kixuan let out a chuckle and muttered under his breath, "I wonder what it is that made that little girl think that I'm weak." After he said this, he lowered his head to check on his body. Even though he looked thin wearing clothes, he actually had defined muscles and a toned body under the clothes. He shouldn't look weak with his proportional body figure. While he was still trying to figure out what made her think he was a weak man, Zhao Lijai was already back to killing zombies. As she beheaded the zombies below using her water blades, she took a glance at Li Kixuan. The moment she saw his confused expression, her eyes flashed with amusement. In her previous life, she was teased a lot by her vice-captain. It was not until later that she learned how to counterattack the teasing. Now, she is already an old ginger compared to her vice-captain. At 3 o'clock in the morning, a shadow suddenly appeared from the opposite direction and blended into the zombie horde. Despite fighting for hours, the number of zombies was still overwhelming. Standing on the top of the metal wall, Jin Zuyan was using a military binocular to check the situation of the zombie horde when he saw something moving at a fast speed between the zombies. Seeing this, he said, "Something is coming." Not far from him, Chin Luzi leaped into the air and flew toward the zombies. A few minutes later, he saw a purple dot moving at a fast speed amongst the red dots. Seeing this, he quickly returned to the wall and said, "Captain, it's an unknown thing." Hearing this, Zhao Lijai asked, "Brother Chin, it didn't appear on your map." "The color is purple. This is the first time I have seen something with this color," Chin Luzi said. Boom! Not long after he said this, something hit the wall, causing the ground to shake, startling the members who were resting. Before they could process what was going on, a shadow leaped out from below and appeared in front of Jin Zuyan. "Watch out!" Zhao Lijai shouted as she raised her hands. Bang! Standing behind an ice shield, Jin Zuyan's eyes widened in surprise the moment he met with a pair of black eyes with a silver pupil. Everyone stared at the pale young man who resembled their captain in shock. Noticing her boyfriend's distraction, Zhao Lijai rushed over while throwing several water blades at the young man. Clang, clang! Before the water blades could hit the young man, they were blocked by him. With a swing of his hand, the water blades were thrown in another direction. As she hugged her boyfriend's waist, Zhao Lijai kicked the ground and leaped several meters away from the young man. After they landed, they finally had time to observe the young man. The moment she saw the long, black, sharp nails on the young man's fingers, she was shocked. Raising her gaze, she met the young man's full black eyes with a silver pupil. She took a sharp breath and said, "He is not a human." "It's a mutant, half human and half zombie," Jin Zuyan replied calmly. Zhao Lijai wanted to ask him how he knew, but before she could utter a word, the mutant had already rushed toward them, aiming his sharp claws at Jin Zuyan's throat. Seeing this, Jin Zuyan pushed his girlfriend away while unsheathing his longsword. Clang! The collision between them ignited sparks, and an energy wave burst out into the surroundings, raising winds and blowing away dust and debris. Captain, the Phantom team members were shocked by the mutant's power. "Don't come closer," Jin Zuyan said as he raised his hand. Boom! A black fireball hit the mutant on his chest, sending him flying. As he fell to the ground below, he crushed the zombies under him. Seeing this, Jin Zuyan swung his longsword, and several black fire blades in crescent shapes flew toward the mutant. Boom, booms, boom! When everyone saw this, they thought that the attack would at least cripple the mutant if not kill it. Unexpectedly, the mutant leaped up and floated in midair. Besides his clothes being torn, he was unscathed. Noticing the strength of this mutant, Zhao Lijai said, "Everyone, focus on clearing out the zombies. I will help Brother Yan." Knowing that she was not just a beautiful vase, the members replied in unison, "Understood." With Jin Zuyan fighting the mutant, the battle command was taken over by Zhang Yuan. Zhao Lijai waved her hands, and 2 water discs appeared in front of her. With a leap, she used the water discs as stepping stones and continued running in midair toward the mutant. Seeing this, Jin Zuyan shouted, "Aitg, be careful." Noticing an enemy approaching him, the mutant suddenly turned to the side and did a roundhouse kick, aiming at Zhao Lijai's neck. Zhao Lijai's alarm rang, and her body moved based on instinct. Leaning back, she barely dodged the attack. As the mutant's military boots moved past her face, she felt a sting and realized that her face was cut from the wind created by the kick. Just from this, she knew that her neck would have been shattered if she had been kicked directly. If she were a normal university student, she might have fainted from fear, but she was a mercenary in her previous life and had faced much stronger opponents than this mutant before. Instead of straightening her back, she flipped backward and kicked the mutant's chin when he turned around. Duog crash. Knowing that her kick lacked the power to injure the mutant, she used her feet to send the water disc toward the mutant's head. Chapter 285, Similarities 1. When Zhao Lijai regained her footing, standing on one water disc, she saw that the mutant's chin was cut by her attack and dark red blood dripped from the wound. With a wave of her hand, the water disc flew back toward her, aiming at the mutant's nape. Noticing the attack, the mutant turned sideways, dodging the attack. Zhao Lijai caught the water disc with her feet and used it to stabilize herself in midair. Everything happened in just a few moments, and the Phantom team members were unable to see what was going on clearly from a distance. Looking at the face that was 70% similar to her boyfriend, Zhao Lijai frowned as a flash of a blurry image appeared in her mind. Before she could catch what the image was, it had already disappeared. For a moment, she felt as if her head was being split open. The pain was nothing she had ever experienced before. In that split moment, the mutant raised his hand, and a compressed wind ball appeared in front of his palm. He looked at her coldly and bent his knees, preparing to kill her. Seeing that his girlfriend seemed in pain, and the water discs on her feet were slowly disappearing, Jin Zuyan's heart clenched. If she fell into the zombie horde, she would be torn apart, like what happened to her in their previous life. Before his mind could react, his body had already moved by instinct. The moment he saw his girlfriend's water discs start to disappear, he leaped from the wall and swung his longsword. Boom! The black fire blade moved toward the mutant and sent him flying, stopping his attack. At the same time, he reached out and pulled his girlfriend into his embrace. As they fell toward the zombies, Jin Zuyan turned his body while swinging his longsword. Boom! The next moment, a circle of black flame killed the zombies below, and the fire ring continued to expand.
Raw.
With the fire ring as a barrier, the zombies were burned into ashes before they could reach the two of them. Jin Zuyan lowered his head to check on his girlfriend. But before he could do that, he felt a chill run down his spine. Turning around, he saw the mutant run through the fire ring and aim his sharp claws at the back of his head. While hugging his girlfriend, he leaped to the side, dodging the attack. Boom! A huge hole appeared on the ground, while dust and debris floated in the air. With a layer of dust obscuring his vision, Jin Zuyan could only detect the mutant's movement from the fluctuation of energy in the air. Feeling something coming from his right side, he turned his body and sent a kick. Duag! His kick was blocked by the mutant's arm. With another person in his arms, he couldn't use his longsword, and his movement was limited. The mutant's pupils flashed as a moment of clarity returned to his blurry mind. Seeing the person in front of him, the mutant was stunned for a second. Embraced by her boyfriend, Zhao Lijai saw this opening and raised her hand. She had a feeling that she could pull this mutant into her space.
Collect.
The moment she saw the mutant suddenly disappear, she said, "Enter." Both Jin Zuyan and she appeared in the grassland and saw the mutant standing 20 meters away from them in a daze. Feeling the headache worsen, Zhao Lijai let out a groan and held her head in pain. Seeing this, Jin Zuyan asked in panic, "Aitg, what's wrong with you?" Perhaps due to his voice, the mutant finally moved his gaze and stared at them. Before he could take a step forward, several vines came out from the grassland and entangled the mutant's limbs and body, binding him like a mummy. With a thud, the mutant fell to the ground and struggled to break free from the binding. The more he struggles, the tighter the binding. After a while, the mutant stops moving and lies on the ground quietly. Zhao Lijai looked around and saw a small mutant plant near her feet. It kept swaying as if it were asking for praise. Before she lost consciousness, she muttered softly, "Well done." Jin Zuyan was shocked to see his girlfriend suddenly faint. He saw that the mutant was bound and couldn't move, so he ignored him and quickly brought his girlfriend to the house. Outside the space, the Phantom team saw the black fire ring slowly extinguish, and the dust finally settled down. They were waiting anxiously for their captain and sister-in-law to come back. Unfortunately, they waited and waited, but their captain and sister-in-law were nowhere to be seen. Seeing this, Chin Luzi checked his map and said, "I can't see any dots representing captain and sister-in-law. Even the mutant also disappeared." Hearing this, Zyro Kai said in disbelief, "Impossible. Our captain and sister-in-law are very strong. They wouldn't die." When the members heard this, they also didn't want to believe that their captain and sister-in-law were killed by the mutant, but there was no trace of them. Noticing their low mood, Zhang Yuan said, "Everyone, keep your spirits up and continue killing the zombies. Only after we clear out this zombie horde will we be able to find our captain and sister-in-law." The moment they heard this, the members quickly regained their composure. The longer they delayed, the smaller the chance of survival for their captain and sister-in-law. With this thought, their attacks toward the zombies became sharper and deadlier. Not far from them, Gu Shao's and his team were filled with sorrow. They felt it was a pity for such a strong couple to die in this battle. "We couldn't let their efforts be in vain. Everyone, keep up and continue killing the zombies," Gu Shao said. "Understood," the children replied in unison. While everyone was shrouded in a gloomy mood, Li Kixuan was deep in thought. Chapter 286, Similarities, 2. While Li Kixuan continued blasting the zombies with his lightning and blue flame, he recalled the situation during Jin Zuyan's battle against the mutant. He was sure that Jin Zuyan dodged the mutant's attack and counterattacked it. While the area was shrouded with dust, he could vaguely see that the mutant suddenly disappeared, followed by Jin Zuyan and Zhao Lijai. What's more, Qin Luzi's words just now were intriguing. If Jin Zuyan and Zhao Lijai were dead, he shouldn't have said that their dots disappeared and he couldn't see them. He should have said that they were killed. From this point alone, the chance that Jin Zuyan and his girlfriend were still alive was very high. The only question was, what ability did they have for them to be able to disappear in a blink of an eye? The moment this question popped into his mind, his eyes flickered, recalling someone in the facility with a similar ability to this. Could it be that one of them has teleportation ability? He muttered under his breath. The more he thought about this possibility, the more he believed it. After all, besides this scenario, he couldn't think of any scenario where they would suddenly disappear from this place without anyone noticing. After he reached this conclusion, the corner of his lips turned and he thought, it seems that it's not bad to stay with this team. With Jin Zuyan's power, he should be able to take down the assassins sent by the facility. As the battle continued, the red moon slowly descended, and the sun rose on the eastern horizon. Not long after the red moon was replaced by the bright sun, the zombies' strength weakened, and their movements were no longer as agile as during the night. Noticing this, Zhang Yuan heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Everyone, take turns to rest." Just after he said this, he saw a group of cars coming from the other side. Narrowing his eyes, he found that the cars seemed familiar. As the cars grew closer, he finally realized that it was the Eagle team and Zun Qi's team. When they parked their cars, Zhang Yuan leaped down from the metal wall and walked over. As Wei Wying and his team came out of the cars, they saw him covered in dust and sweat. Despite his sorry appearance, his eyes were sharp and full of killing intent. Walking toward him, Wei Wying said, "Old Zhang, we came to help you." Hearing this, Zhang Yuan said, "Thank you for coming. We indeed need others to help cover us up. Most of my team members are exhausted and we need a rest." Wei Wying looked at the metal wall and asked, "How is the situation?" "The zombie horde is still under control, but a high-level zombie appeared at dawn. My captain and comrade Zhao Lijai fought with the zombie, but they disappeared suddenly. At this moment, their situation is unknown," Zhang Yuan replied. The moment he said this, the Eagle team members and the soldiers sent by Zun Qi to help were shocked. They knew how strong that couple was. If even they were unable to kill the zombie, then the situation would be dangerous. After a moment of silence, Wei Wying said, "We will find them after we clear out this horde." Turning to his team, he said, "Everyone, prepare for battle." Hearing this, Zhang Yuan turned and said, "Wen Kai, Wen Mo, build a ladder for them." Understood. Following the order, a metal ladder was built in less than 5 minutes. Looking at the metal ladder glistening under the morning sun, Wei Wying was deep in thought. While metal-type ability users could control metal, it was rare for them to be able to create metal out of thin air. At most, the metal-type ability users could only use the available metal and change their shapes. Therefore, Wen Kai was a very rare ability user. Compared to the common metal, his metal also looked different. What he didn't know was that Wen Kai's metal was tungsten. While tungsten has the highest density, it would shatter during impact. So Wenmo would use his brother's metal and combine it with other metals when he created bullets, blades, metal walls, and other things. What's more, Wenmo's metal-type ability was not only able to control the metals, but also detect metal elements. He could detect any metal component in the surroundings, making it easier to collect specific metal elements he needed. Therefore, without the two of them working together, it was impossible for them to be able to create strong weapons and a hard wall. Wei Wying only thought for a moment, and quickly went to the top of the wall, followed by the soldiers. The moment he and the soldiers saw the situation on the other side, they were stunned. Some of the soldiers even turned pale and were trembling from fear. Noticing this, Shen Jinj said, "Don't worry, I will burn the corpses so they won't be able to climb the wall." His voice was hoarse due to exhaustion. After he said this, Chen Ji added, "If they manage to climb, I will cover the wall with ice so they will slip and fall down." When he heard this, Shen Jinj raised his eyebrows and said, "Brother Chen, your ice will melt due to my fire's high temperature." "Jinj, my ice won't melt so easily," Chen Ji replied confidently. While the two of them exchanged words, the blue flame was burning the zombies' corpses under the wall. Due to this, the temperature of the metal wall was high. Even through the military boots, the soldiers could still feel the heat burning their soles. Noticing their small movements of moving their feet, Chen Ji placed his hand on the metal wall and covered the top with a layer of thin ice. While it couldn't lower the temperature much, it could block part of the heat. What's more, a thin layer of ice wouldn't make them slip. Chapter 287, Similarities 3. The soldiers felt relieved by the lowered temperature and finally pulled out their guns and started killing the zombies. Seeing this, the Phantom team members pulled their airguns and lent them to the soldiers. "Comrade, why did you give us your guns?" one of the soldiers asked with doubt. "Just use it, my team's guns have unlimited bullets," Yu Fian said as he pulled his gun's trigger.
Top.
The soldiers were shocked when they saw him kill the zombies with a headshot without even looking. It was no wonder that the Phantom team was ranked as S rank. Even their research team was so strong. While the Phantom took a rest, Wei Wying and the soldiers guarded the wall. At the same time, inside Zhao Lijai's space, Jin Zuyan was sitting on the chair beside the bed. Holding his girlfriend's hand, he used his energy to check her condition. When he found no problem with her health and also saw no injuries inside her body, he finally let out a sigh of relief. Even though he didn't know why his girlfriend was still unconscious, he was no longer as panicked as before. Recalling that the pond water had some healing effect, he went to the kitchen and took an empty gallon bottle. After he filled the bottle with the pond water, he went to the kitchen and boiled the water. When it was done, he let it cool to room temperature before he fed his girlfriend some water. After he fed her a glass of water, he undressed himself before he undressed her. With the two of them in their birthday suits, he carried her to the bathroom. He went into the bathtub and leaned back with his girlfriend in his arms. As the water filled up the bathtub, he used an exfoliating sponge and body gel to help her take a bath.
At first,
he had no other intention, but when his palm touched her perky mounds, some thoughts started to sprout in his mind. Before he noticed it, the exfoliating sponge was replaced by his palm. Years of holding guns and longswords had made his palms covered with calluses. As he rubbed her body, she frowned and let out a soft moan. The moment he heard this, his body tensed, and a part of his body suddenly hardened. As his eyes darkened, he snapped out of his thoughts. Fearing that he wouldn't be able to control himself, Jin Zuyan quickly cleaned their bodies and rinsed the soap. Only after he dried their bodies, put on a set of clean clothes, and pulled a thin blanket to cover his girlfriend's curvy figure did he let out a helpless sigh. Since he had lots of energy, he should use it to kill the mutant. With this thought, he took his longsword and walked to the grassland. When he arrived, the mutant was still lying on the grassland, bound with vines all over his body, except his face. On the side, a small mutant plant used its small leaves to slap the mutant's face. The small mutant plant let out a series of squeaks, as if it were scolding the mutant. When he walked closer, the mutant plant was startled and quickly buried itself into the ground, leaving only a small part of its head out, making it look similar to the surrounding grass. Seeing this, Jin Zuyan ignored the mutant plant and stood beside the half-zombie, half-human mutant instead. As he met the mutant's gaze, he said calmly, "After so many years, I never expected them to actually succeed in creating my clone." Squatting beside the mutant, he stared into the black eyes and asked, "Have you gained sentience?" The mutant continued to stare at him but said nothing. Losing interest in the mutant, Jin Zuyan reached out and flipped him over like a pancake. Pulling out his dagger, he stabbed at the mutant's nape. As the dark red blood flowed out from the wound, he reached into the wound using his fingers. After a moment, he pulled out a small chip from the mutant's body. A red light continued to blink, as if it was sending signals. Looking at the chip, his eyes darkened, and killing intent flashed in his eyes. Clenching his fist, Jin Zuyan said, "Those old bastards really overestimate themselves." Opening his palm, the chip had been reduced to dust. He kicked the mutant and watched it roll on the ground. He looked at the mutant's face, and suddenly felt that there were lots of similarities between this mutant and his long-lost friend. Jin Zuyan took a closer look before a familiar yet unfamiliar face flashed in his mind. He grabbed the mutant's chin and said in disbelief, "Fuguari." He thought his friend was no longer alive after being kidnapped by the human traffickers. He never expected him to end up at the hands of those bastards and be turned into this. Anger rose in his heart when he thought of how much torture his friend had endured during the experiment process. He punched the ground and said through gritted teeth, "Pei Zun, I will definitely kill you." Now that he had found out the identity of this mutant, he could no longer treat him as an object. Without unbinding the vines on Fu Guari's body, he carried him to the pond. Holding onto his jaw, Jin Zuyin pried his mouth open and used a ladle to feed him the pond water. As the water entered his mouth, Fu Guari's Adam's apple rolled, and he drank the water. He was like a robot without any emotions or feelings. Even when his nape was stabbed with a dagger, he didn't let out a sound nor frown. After he finished feeding him the pond water, Jin Zuyin checked on Fu Guari's wound. The moment he saw that the wound had already scabbed over, his eyes widened in surprise. He thought for a while before muttering, "It seems that they are not only turning you into a mutant, but also altering your DNA using mine."